ever since Biden become president, he's the one who uses pen, reversed the previous President Trump's border policies, and enabled 11 million illegals in this country with taxpayers' incentives and funding for factoring cities and caused crime range. You should be responsible. You should not even run for Congress because you are part of that regime who caused this problem. Now you offer bigger government solution, more money. You don't need more money. You need to use his pen to reverse
30 seconds,
his executive orders.
30 seconds.
Again, my opponent is focused on me. I am focused on the voters and on actual solutions that I believe Congress can and must advance. And one of those solutions, Adam, is the bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform and border security bill that would allow us to make the critically needed updates to our system. This is a worldview that my opponent has embraced. She believes that we should give a break to the wealthiest and the biggest corporations and hope for the best, hope that the results will trickle down to hardworking people. I take a very different approach. I believe that the middle class deserves a tax cut, and I believe that we will do a lot for this country by ensuring that we don't continue this disastrous tax policy.
Ms. Tong-Williams.
You are wealthy. You are worth $20 million to $30 million. How do you know about regular people suffering? Do you go shopping, go to Walmart, buy food? I talk to those people. And you pretend to be renter in Nashua a few months ago, move back to run for this open seat with millions of dollars from Washington, D.C. insiders. And the millions of dollars. I don't have money to run a TV ad. And you pretend you are poor, complain rent is so high. You couldn't save that apartment for other people to rent in Nashua. Just go back to your $2 million home in Portsmouth. Please don't say that because you do not understand regular people's concern. People cry in my arms on District 2.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I got to tell you guys, Democrats are having a hard time defending the disastrous policies of the Biden administration. Okay, this is why you have some Democrats coming out and saying, you know what? I cannot say with a straight face that I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris, endorse Kamala Harris, or be associated with Kamala Harris because her policies, the policies of the Biden administration, have been an absolute disaster. And this is negatively affecting Democrats in down ballot races, which is something that we should pay attention to, okay? Because it's not just important for Trump to be elected president, but we also have to take back the Senate and keep the House. If we win both chambers of Congress and the White House, that will be the best case scenario for Trump to actually get the things accomplished that he wants to get done, okay? And that is why it's important to pay attention to some of these races, which is why I played that clip of Miss Willie Tang Williams, who is a Republican that speaks a little bit of broken English, okay? But she is a Republican that escaped communism in China. She came to America legally, okay? And she was on stage schooling Miss Maggie Goodlander, who is the wife of Jake Sullivan, who works for the Biden administration, okay? And, you know, the liberals are making fun of Miss Lily Tang Williams for her broken English, but, you know, hey, at least she knows English, okay? At least she can speak it, okay? I mean, I can't really say that about a lot of the illegals that Democrats have let into the country who only know Spanish and they have no interest whatsoever in learning English, okay? So liberals, once again, are showing us that they're not very tolerant, they're not very loving, and they're not very liberal. But yeah, that race is a congressional race in New Hampshire. And again, those are the type of races that we should pay attention to and be aware of, because those type of races are what's going to determine the balance of power and how much Trump is actually going to be able to get done. So with that being said, that takes me to this clip here of Joe Rogan having a conversation with John Fetterman about the illegal immigration problem, in which Joe Rogan is going to school John Fetterman on the so-called bipartisan border bill and how that would not solve illegal immigration, right? This is one of the biggest psyops that the Democrats have put out here, which is this idea that this bipartisan border bill legislation is going to solve all the problems and that it is Trump's fault that the border is broken, right? When it's really the fault of the Biden-Harris administration due to them repealing Trump's executive orders that he put in place to help secure the border. And we don't necessarily need legislation in order to secure the border. Now, I definitely think that we need something in order to make it permanent, but Democrats have no interest in actually securing the border as much as they have an interest in normalizing illegal immigration, which is what Joe Rogan is going to point out here. So without further ado, let's get into it.
There's a significant number of these people that are illegal immigrants that have made their way to swing states. And then there's been calls for amnesty. There's been calls for allowing these people to have a pathway to citizenship and allow them to vote. The fear that a lot of people have is that this is a coordinated effort to take these people that you're allowing to come into the country, then you're providing them with all sorts of services like food stamps and housing and setting them up, and then providing a pathway to amnesty, and then you would have voters that would be significantly voting towards the Democrats because they're the people that enabled them to come into the country in the first place and provided them with those services. This is a big fear that people have, and that you're rigging this system and that this will turn all these states into essentially locked blue like California is.
Well, it's immigration is always going to be a tough issue in our nation. I had as a professor in grad school, Alan Simpson, and he was a United States senator. He was Wyoming, and he was actually a pro-choice Republican. I mean, how rare that would be. Well, it doesn't exist now. And he said, you are never going to have any meaningful immigration kinds of legislation. He's like, because both sides, that's useful for them, and it's going to be back and forth. And he said that 25 years ago.
Useful meaning the debate, having it always a political
it's
talking
useful
point.
For one side or the other. It's
right.
useful, and he said there were never going to be, and he said that in 1999, and I voted for the border deal, and that went down. And that's, I mean, he said that 25 years ago, and that was absolutely true now, that they had an opportunity to do a comprehensive border, bipartisan, and that went down because Trump, he declared that's a bad deal after it was negotiated with the other side.
But didn't that deal also involve amnesty, and didn't that deal also involve a significant number of illegal aliens being allowed into the country every year? I think it was 2 million people. So it was still the same sort of situation, and their fear is exactly what I talked about, that these people will be moved to swing states, and that will be used to essentially rig those states and turn them blue forever.
Well, I'm not really sure if that's what's in play. I think it's really it's important that we have to have an honest conversation.
But doesn't that seem logical, though? If you have a significant number of people that are being moved into swing states that have come across the border illegally, and then you've provided them with all these services, you provided them with food stamps, EBT, you've provided them with housing. You could, if you gave those people amnesty and allowed those people to vote, and it was very organized. You're talking about 75,000 votes over a few counties that switched everything over to the Republicans. You could see how you import 10 million people over the course of 4 years illegally, and then move a significant number of them to swing states, and then provide them with all these services, and then give them a path to citizenship. You could essentially rig those states.
Undeniably, immigration is changing our nation. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time in Texas, but it's very clear that immigration has remade Texas, and I think it's for a good thing.
Wow. Immigration has remade Texas, says sitting Democrat Senator John Fetterman, who basically just conceded every point that Joe Rogan made in that segment, in which Joe Rogan correctly points out that the so-called bipartisan border legislation that was secretly negotiated by Joe Biden and 3 senators, including a traitor or 2 from the GOP, that was a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse to normalize illegal immigration, to allow a certain amount of illegals into the country, and to say, well, we fixed the problem because technically they're not here illegally, right? Technically, they're here legally, so therefore we don't have an illegal immigration problem. Although the actual real problem is that you're letting too many people into this country, a lot of whom are not thoroughly vetted because the Biden-Harris administration doesn't have the ability to thoroughly vet these individuals, which is something that Bill Clinton admitted out loud on the campaign trail. That's the problem, and it is remaking this country in ways that are not good for the country. As Trump says, the rest of the world is basically treating this country like a garbage can, right? Where they're just letting all of the people that, they really don't want into the country, right? They're just saying, hey, go to the United States of America. Just go there, right? You don't need to be here. Okay, all of these criminals from Venezuela, they're now operating in the United States of America, and we're seeing the consequences of that, right? This is something that American people are living with. This is the reality of what is happening, and it benefits Democrats electorally because of the fact that these illegals are counted as a part of the census. So when it comes around to the House seats, these states like New York and California that have a large amount of illegals, at least in the short term, will benefit due to having illegals be counted as a part of their population, right? And in the long term, what they really want to do is they want the illegals that are in the red states to be granted amnesty so they can stay, and then given a pathway to citizenship, which means that they will eventually become citizens and be able to vote, right? And as Joe Rogan brought up in this conversation, he says, well, yeah, if you import 75,000 illegals into some small red county, okay, well, what does that do when you eventually allow those people to vote? What does that do? Well, it gives them more power and control, right? It gives Democrats more power and control because a lot of those illegals are going to end up voting Democrat. Now, some of them won't, right? Because some of them are fleeing communism, right? So a lot of them are just thankful to be here, and some of them will end up voting Republicans because they're like, well, I don't really want to turn the United States into the country that I fled, but a lot of them will just vote Democrat because they're thankful that the Democrats let them into the country in the first place, okay? And Democrats like to give lip service to the illegals. So, yeah, they will support Democrats because they're thankful that Democrats allowed them to be here, right? So, it's just funny that when presented with this, John Fetterman couldn't really refute any of the points that Joe Rogan had brought up. Now, I mean, here's the thing. It is John Fetterman. So John Fetterman, he's dealing with his own issues mentally, cognitively. But let's be real. Could Kamala Harris had refuted anything that Joe Rogan said there? That segment is the exact reason why Kamala Harris avoided the Joe Rogan interview, right? That's why she decided to go out of her way not to do the interview, because she would not be able to have that conversation with Joe Rogan. She would not be able to use her talking points in order to get through that. She would actually have to sit down and have a real conversation and examine what's going on here and the incentive structure that Democrats have in place to allow unfettered illegal immigration. And that's not even mentioning the fact that illegal immigrants are seen as cheap labor by Democrats, right? The new slave labor class are the illegal immigrants. And that's also part of the reason why they want them here so much, because, again, according to Democrats, we need them to pick our cotton, okay? Democrats showed us once again that they're still the same Democrat Party of the 1800s, right? That was the party of slavery, okay? They're still that party. So listen to their rhetoric on illegal immigration, and it tells you everything you need to know about whether or not they have evolved. No, they haven't evolved. They had just done a better job at hiding who they actually are, okay? But they are the same party that they were back then. But again, what you just saw there is the exact reason why Kamala Harris tried to set all of these parameters around the interview so that she wouldn't have to deal with those type of questions. She would not have to have that conversation. So shout out to John Fetterman, who again is dealing with some issues upstairs, but at the same time, he still went on the platform to have that conversation, to do what Kamala Harris refused to do. And I got to tell you, I may disagree with John Fetterman politically, but I kind of respect the guy, right? In the sense that sometimes, he makes sense, okay? He makes sense. And, he's not the typical far left Democrat, even though, again, on some issues like abortion, he's as far left as it gets. But on some other things, the guy, he makes sense. I can kind of see why he defeated Dr. Oz in his Senate race, especially in a state like Pennsylvania, in which somebody like John Fetterman, at least from an optics perspective, definitely appeals to some of those kind of working class male voters. And that probably was one of the primary reasons why John Fetterman ended up winning that race in the first place. But, I think that John Fetterman is somebody that's kind of growing on me, to be honest with you. Again, I disagree with the guy politically, but kudos to him for going on Joe Rogan's show, doing something that Kamala Harris refused to do. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.